of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Enjoy being educated in such topics as personal injury law, community association law, family law, bankruptcy law, along with health show topics like pain management, men's health, and dental implants. Now, sit back and enjoy today's Ask the Experts with host Steve-O.
Hey, good afternoon, late afternoon. I have today probably one of the best shows that we've ever had on in years. And I'm going to tell you why just a minute. This is the Ask the Expert show. We are on every Monday and Thursday from 6 to 7 p.m. drive time. You can also go to our Facebook tonight and actually watch the show live by going to Ask the Experts Steve-O host. Now, we have been being inundated. I mean, I have never gotten so many emails, and I know why, because of COVID, people wanting us to bring back a bankruptcy or foreclosure show. And at one time, our guest was our expert, and it just, I'm telling you, we were able to get him back. I am so glad. I am so happy to reintroduce you to Ed Shahady, bankruptcy foreclosure attorney. Hi, Ed.
Hey, how you doing, Steve?
This is much better like this, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a little easier to get ready. I'll tell you that. Just here in my house.
You don't have to fight all that. You don't have to fight all that traffic. So we're on right now. We're on 1470 AM, 96.9 FM, 103.9 FM, and 95.3 FM. So we have a lot of stations out there broadcasting tonight. And how sad, but it's the times, bankruptcy, foreclosure. Should you not? That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And then in the second half of our show, which is going to be our political show, we have Corey Lewandowski and Kayleigh McEnany, who is the assistant to the president. She is a spokesperson for the White House. They will both be on in the second half. So, Ed, we have so many new listeners now since you were last on. Tell everybody about your practice.
Well, I focus on foreclosure and bankruptcy. That's the main thing. And then I do some other things too, some commercial litigation, those types of cases. But a lot of what I do is bankruptcy and foreclosure.
And what chapters do you usually try to concentrate on?
I do mostly personal bankruptcy, which is Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. Which most of your listeners, that's probably what they'd be interested in, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's times are rough out there. I mean, they're getting ready to reopen Florida, but all these people that have been kind of holding off on their mortgages, which was nice of the mortgage companies to do, but guess what? It's going to be due pretty someday.
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion out there. There's a lot of offers being made, a lot of forbearances, which is good. But then what happens when you have to start paying again? And oftentimes it's not clear. And I have clients that, think that once they have to start paying again, they're just going to start paying. But, some of the banks are like, no. When you start paying, you have, we gave you a 6-month forbearance, but you need to come up with those 6 months. And so it's a lot of confusion out there and a lot of concern. I even had a bankruptcy client that had that. She's in bankruptcy now, and she made an arrangement with her bank to stop making her payments, which they permitted. And then they filed paperwork that indicated that after, I think it was a 3-month forbearance, that after the 3 months, she would have to come up with the 3 months. And her and I spoke about it. And then she sent me a letter that contradicted that. They said in writing to her that they would fold the 3 months into into her loan. So luckily, she had something in writing, and I was able to present it to the bank's attorney, and they were surprised too, because that's not what they were told. But we were able to work that out. But it's real important. Anybody that's in a forbearance, make sure that you get something in writing from the bank, or at least, we'll put it this way, make sure that you understand what the agreement is and get something in writing that's consistent with your understanding. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Hey, Ed, what's going to happen to people's credit? I mean, they're not forgiving these loans, and people are becoming past due. What's going to happen to their credit?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I would imagine that their credit's going to be affected negatively if they can't make the payments when they're due. Now, again, if there's a forbearance, that typically shouldn't affect it. But, when you talk credit, you're talking about 3 credit reporting agencies, and they're all private companies, and how they handle it is different. I mean, there's certain, statutory requirements as to how they report data and how they collect it. But by and large, they're independent companies, and they report as they see fit. So if you're late, even if it is a forbearance, or if you have permission, it shouldn't go up against your credit, but it certainly could. So it's kind of an unknown right now. There's a lot of unknowns. This is kind of a unprecedented. Well, it's not kind of. It's an extremely unprecedented situation. Yeah. So it's a tough call. I can't really.
Yeah, because this is all so new to all of us.
Right.
Would you explain the different types of bankruptcies there are? Because there's a lot of people who've never gone through bankruptcy who really don't even know.
Sure. The 2 types are Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. And people, that doesn't really mean a lot to people, but what it comes down to is this: you can either let me put it this way. It depends on a couple of factors, depending on what your income is. If your household income exceeds the mean, which in Broward and Palm Beach counties and Miami-Dade, it's around $50,000 a year for a 1-person household, maybe 55 for 2. But if your income exceeds the mean income, then you have to file what's called a Chapter 13. And what that means is, you can still discharge the debt that you have, but you have to pay your creditors back a little bit of money, depending upon what your disposable income is, which is the income you have left after you pay your bills. So otherwise, if your income's below the mean, at or below the mean, then you can file what's called a Chapter 7, and you can really get a discharge of all of your debts. Now, the other issue is not all of your debts, but most of them. You can't get a discharge of certain debts, like school loans is a big one. They're not dischargeable. And you also can't get rid of traffic fines and any fraud debts. Any debts incurred through fraud are not dischargeable. Also,
Child
another
support.
big factor. Yes, that's right.
Child
Although
support.
in child support, you can't get rid of it. But if you're behind in a Chapter 13, which is where you pay your creditors back, you can include that as part of your plan. So if you are behind, you can make arrangements to catch up. So in a way, child support is addressed in bankruptcy. But yeah, you can't discharge it. That's correct. But the other factor is, what are your assets? Now, for somebody that has no job and no assets, it's really simple. That's a straight Chapter 7. Whatever your debts are, you report them, you file paperwork, and you walk away from all your debts. That's a Chapter 7. That's a straight liquidation. But if you have assets, I mean, in Florida, your house, if it's a homestead, if it's where you live and it's your homestead, then and you own a home, then you keep the house no matter what. It's exempt from creditors. Now, there's an exception, of course, and that's, if you have a mortgage that you're not paying, you have to pay your mortgage. But as far as it counting as an asset in your bankruptcy, it doesn't count. Other assets that you may have will count. In Florida, you keep your house, and you can keep, if you own a home, you can keep up to $2,000 worth of other stuff. So you might have, clothes, furniture, some money in the bank. But anything over that, you have to make arrangements for it. So again, for a person who doesn't have a lot, bankruptcy is great. Even if you have assets, it's okay. But you're probably going to, if you do have assets, you're probably going to have to pay your creditors back some of the money that you owe them. But usually it's not a whole lot. And often it depends a lot on what your assets are. So it's kind of if you make more than the mean income, which is the which is the middle income in your area, then you have to pay your creditors back something. Also, if you have assets that are over 2,000, then you have to pay your creditors back some more money. So it's kind of a fairness thing. So if you have some assets, and there's people that can have a lot of assets still unable to pay, say they don't have a job. And another thing is, when I say assets, we're really talking about an asset. They say you own a car, but if you owe money on the car and you owe more than the car is worth, that's not an asset. There's nothing there. So if you lease a car, that's another example. So assets are going to be something that you could sell and get money for. Another an asset that would be exempt would be retirement money. That doesn't count against your assets. So the two bankruptcies really are, if your income's right and you don't have a lot of assets, you can pretty much walk away from all your debt. That's a Chapter 7. The 13, if you have income over 50,000 or you have assets in excess of the 2,000, then you might have to you could do a 13 and you can still get rid of most of your debt. You just have to pay some money back. And the money that you pay back would be spread out over 36 to 60 months. So you would have payments that you would make depending on how many months you want to take. And what your payments would be, it's hard to say until, it depends. Everybody's different. Depends on your income and what your assets are. Yeah.
Okay.
So
if you file bankruptcy, you can keep your car.
Absolutely. In fact, it's interesting. If you are paying for your car on time and you're not behind, you can keep your car. Same with your house. Anything that you're paying on time, you can keep it, and you can still file a bankruptcy and walk away from the rest of your debts. Again, with the exception being if you owe money on it, but maybe there's equity in it. If you have a $15,000 car and you only owe $5,000 on it, which isn't that common, but just giving you an example, then there would be an asset there of $10,000 that you'd have to address. But as long as you're paying on time with your car, you can keep it. However, even if you're behind, you can catch up within the Chapter 13 plan. So yes, there's a couple of different ways to save your car. That's not a problem. The other issue is sometimes people don't want to keep the car. Maybe the payment's too high. You can get rid of it too if you want. So that's another option in bankruptcy. You can, anything that you have that you don't want to keep, any secured debt, if you give up the collateral, a car, whatever, then you can walk away from that debt, no problem. It's just that, people want to keep things, typically a house and a car. You just have to make arrangements to continue to make payments. And if you've fallen behind, then you have to catch up on your past due within the bankruptcy. But if you call me and say, hey, I'm paid on my car, it's not a problem, I just want to get rid of all my credit card debts, could literally file a bankruptcy and not even include the car. You just keep paying it, and it's no problem. You get rid of all your credit card debts. So,
hey, Ed, do you charge for a consultation?
Nope, I don't.
Okay.
And I do. Go ahead.
It would be a very good idea for people to contact you, and you can lay it out for them whether they should file for bankruptcy, because they don't know all their options. So give everybody your phone number.
Sure, it's 954-442-1000. Easy number.
And you have a great website. What is it?
It's Shahady-law.com. And the last name, it's spelled Shahady. Shahady. That's my last name. There's a hyphen in the word law.com.
Shahady's very easy, just like it sounds. We're going to go to break. When we come back, we're going to come back with attorney Ed Shahady. We're talking bankruptcy today and foreclosure. And listen, it's not embarrassing. It's not like it used to be. Our own president declared bankruptcy. You know what? Sometimes it's better to get these creditors off your back and give it over to an attorney, let them handle it, give you a peace of mind. So we're going to go to break. When we come back, we'll have more with attorney Ed Shahady.
The Shahady Law Firm thanks the Axe the Expert Show for selecting it as one of the finest bankruptcy and foreclosure firms in South Florida. The Shahady Law Firm thanks the Axe the Expert Show for selecting it as one of the finest bankruptcy and foreclosure firms in South Florida. The Shahady Law Firm can be reached at any time, day or night, at 954-442-1000. When it comes to defending a foreclosure or filing a bankruptcy, you should contact the Shahady Law Firm to discuss your options. At the Shahady Law Firm, you will receive personal direct service from attorney Edward Shahady. You are not handed off to junior staff under the supervision of an attorney like large firms. He will personally help you through the complicated and stressful process of defending a foreclosure or filing for bankruptcy. That number again is 954-442-1000. The Shahady Law Firm is committed to taking a full-service, aggressive, and innovative approach to each client's unique and personal needs. Call the Shahady Law Firm today for a free consultation. That number again is 954-442-1000. Evening and weekend appointments and low-down easy payment plans are available upon request. Call now, 954-442-1000.
Hey, we're back with the Ask the Expert Show. I'm host Steve O. We're here with attorney Ed Shahady. He is a local bankruptcy, and he also handles foreclosures. And I got to tell you, you do not want to handle this yourself. You want to get an attorney that deals in this on a daily basis. Since we started our social media on the show, I just got 2 text messages from listeners wanting to know about garnishing of wages, Ed.
Sure. Garnishing of wages is something that we see quite often. That is something that's available to a creditor. They do need to get a judgment. Some people think a creditor now the IRS, if the IRS has a judgment against you or lien, they can garnish your wages right away. But a creditor, they might threaten to garnish your wages, but remember, they have to file a lawsuit against you first, then get a judgment, then they can garnish your wages. What that involves is it's typically 25% of your income. Well, it's not typically, that's the maximum. However, depending on what your income is, it may be less than that if your income's on the lower range. That's something that can be immediately stopped in bankruptcy without question. And again, in that situation, depending on what you qualify for, you may have to pay them nothing. I mean, again, once they have a judgment, now they're executing on the judgment and they're collecting money from you. But once you file bankruptcy and discharge the debt, in most cases, that should be the end of it. It shouldn't. Typically, a garnishment doesn't deal with a secured debt, because if it's a secured debt, that means there's collateral, and they typically take the collateral and sell it. So in most cases, when there's a garnishment, just filing a bankruptcy is enough to stop it. And the minute we file, that stops it right away. So
Ed, I know there's a lot of people out there with COVID and businesses being shut down. There's a lot of people out there that really, it's been tough on them, very, very tough on them. And I got to tell you, when you hire a bankruptcy attorney, first of all, doesn't mean Ed might tell you, there's other means to get this worked out. But when you hire a bankruptcy attorney, it just takes all the pressure off of you, moves it over to Ed, and the creditors can't even call you anymore. Is that right, Ed?
Yeah, it's really nice. I mean, they can't bother you anymore. The moment you file, there's something called a stay. That's really a freeze on all collection efforts. And in the vast majority, we'll put it this way: if you see an attorney such as me and I consult with you, then there are few exceptions, but in 99% of the time, the stay that I'm talking about will last throughout the bankruptcy. In some cases, if you filed bankruptcy within the past year or two, sometimes that can affect it. But in 99.9% of the cases, the minute you file, there'll be a stay or a freeze. So nobody will call you, nobody will bother you. And that'll continue throughout the bankruptcy process, through and including the discharge. So, let's say there's a garnishment. Let's say you're getting calls. The minute you file, the garnishment stops. All the calls stop. And if you file, you should get a discharge. I mean, that's what the goal is. And so once you get a discharge, they can't bother you then either. So it's a very effective way to stop all. Yeah. So it's a lot of people feel weird about it. They have moral issues, but I tell people, it's not. I mean, I'm amazed at how many people really have moral issues about it. But your creditors don't have any moral issues about loaning you money and calling you at all hours of the night. And they don't. And actually, it's just a business. I mean, they're not upset with you. Unless it's your Uncle Frank or something that loans you the money. But
Right.
if there's a business, in the business of loaning you money, they're not upset. That's just the cost of doing business. That's factored in. Some people are going to declare bankruptcy, and so yeah. I mean, you should not have any qualms about it. If you need to do it, it's not the best thing for everybody. You typically want to have at least about $10,000 in debt. I mean, I've done it for people with less, but it usually doesn't make that much sense if you're under 10. There are exceptions, but and it's not for everybody. It just depends on what your goals are, but it's certainly worth looking into and
Absolutely.
just exploring it.
What about garnishing bank accounts? Now, before you declare bankruptcy, can creditors come in and actually garnish your bank account?
Yes, the same as garnishing your wages, they can garnish your bank account as well. And that can be pretty devastating. If they go in, they don't tell you about it until you don't get notice until afterwards. But what's important to remember is when your bank account gets garnished, the bank doesn't immediately turn the money over to the creditor. You have time to respond to the complaint. So what happens is there's an order, a garnishment order. It's served on the bank. The bank then takes the money from you. So people think, okay, well, I lost that money. You haven't lost it. The bank's just putting it in suspense, and you have a certain period of time to respond to that garnishment order. And if you file a bankruptcy within that time and you qualify, then all that money comes right back to you. I mean, I've had people, $4,000 or $5,000 comes right back to them as soon as we file bankruptcy. Yeah. So it can make a big difference. Yeah, it can be a huge.
Well, Ed's going to be back with us again next month, and I'm so glad that we have you back. Give everybody your phone number again, Ed.
Sure. Yep, it's 954-442-1000.
And the law firm is Ed Shahady. You practice in both Broward and Palm Beach, is that correct?
Yep, and I also, Broward and Palm Beach, and also Miami-Dade as well. So all three counties. My office is located in Broward Plantation, but I practice in all three counties. Yeah.
But people can Zoom now too, right? They don't even have to come to your office anymore.
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely. I doing a lot more of those. People are a lot more comfortable with Zoom, so a lot of meetings I'll have on Zoom. And I still meet people in person, but not that often. Not that often at the office. Usually on Zoom or by phone.
Ed, I'm so glad you're back. Ed'll be back again next month. Ed Shahady, bankruptcy and foreclosure. We're going to go to break, and we come back. We have our political show. Thanks, Ed.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
The Shahady Law Firm thanks the Axe the Esper Show for selecting it as one of the finest bankruptcy and foreclosure firms in South Florida. The Shahady Law Firm thanks the Axe the Esper Show for selecting it as one of the finest bankruptcy and foreclosure